What's up, everyone? Happy First Contact Day to all you Star Trek fans out there. I saw the first couple episodes of Star Trek Discovery Season 5, and I really enjoyed them, but I'm not talking about those today. I'm talking about a book called Star Trek The Next Generation: The Eyes of the Beholders, not to be confused with the episodes of the same or similar names, I guess I should say. So, full transparency, I tried recording a video of this, and then after a half hour of work, it said that the video did not download. Now, of course, it would have been less than a half hour with edits and such, but yeah, I just decided to record myself on audio and I'll add picture to you don't need to see me, like who the heck cares really. But yeah, I just figured this would be easier and it's easier to pause this way for me personally as I'm recording the audio instead of going through and editing parts out. My time is very limited. I'm a novelist and I do other things and I work on stuff. So this is the most convenient way for me to do this at the moment. So instead of talking about the main plot of this book by A.C. Crispin, whose birthday is also First Contact Day, like today would have been her birthday. This book came out in 1990, and I'm not going to really be talking about the main plot. I'm going to be talking about the data-centric subplot. This really felt like one of those TNG episodes where the data subplot, like, or whatever data is up to, is what I'm more focused on than whatever the main problem or conflict is. And I think this is fascinating to read about through the lens of what the climate's been like today when it comes to AI. So the data subplot in this book is that he is trying to write a romance novel. So, he's an android and therefore AI, and he's trying to write a novel. Now, for us today in 2024, this book came out in 1990. I think it takes place after the best of both worlds. And today, there's a lot of AI discourse. AI is very terrifying. We've seen images of like visual art that was created by AI and it uses elements from other artists' works. And we've also seen people use AI to generate written stuff. I think there are like different apps and whatnot for these. I've seen that social media has started to use this sort of thing, using AI to write posts or to expand a post or make it in a certain style. And I've seen screenshots of AI written stuff here and there. I do not use AI for my works, for my fiction writing, because I'm not about that. I use my own voice. I believe in doing the hard work of figuring out the best way to tell my story on my own, and maybe with some feedback from some other people. So that's where I stand on that. But yeah, reading this book about Data trying to write a novel, it was kind of strange because in our world, in real life, we're used to talking about AI in this way that we've been talking about, but in these fictional works like Star Trek, like Star Wars, we assign personhood to artificial intelligence, whether it be androids, droids, and of course there are many other examples of sci-fi. And so for those particular characters that we love so much, it's kind of weird how we're okay with them creating stuff. Or I guess I shouldn't say we, maybe not everyone is like that. Whereas in real life, AI creating content like this, it's really scary. So I guess when we view fictional works trying this with robots and androids and whatnot. It's kind of like an escapist thing, like a funny thing to observe, I guess. Uh, yeah, I don't really know where I'm going with that. It's just strange, the disconnect between dealing with that in real life and watching it in a different way in fiction. But in this particular book, there are some comparisons that you can draw. So Data tries writing a romance novel that is set in the early days of space travel. I think particularly lunar travel, if I remember correctly. And he writes this scene and he shows it to Geordi first, and Geordi thinks it's terrible and doesn't have the heart to tell him. In these different iterations of the scene, we see like awkward dialogue, pretty much like this is not how humans talk, and I could very much imagine something being created like that by AI in our world. Like I can imagine someone using AI to generate something that feels very off with the dialogue and doesn't feel like something said by actual people. So Geordi suggests maybe Data share it with Riker, since he might have more of a perspective when it comes to like these adventurous romance things. And Riker reads it, and like Geordi, he doesn't have the heart to tell Data how terrible it is. But he does suggest maybe giving it a more masculine feel, since maybe romance isn't really what he reads. I believe he mentioned Hemingway as a writer. A Farewell to Arms, For Whom the Bell Tolls. He also mentions Riverton. And so when Data shares the manuscript with Wesley gives it a read. It's been revised. It has more of an attempt at a Hemingway feel. I'm not as experienced with reading Hemingway's catalog. I think I've read stuff here and there a long time ago. But yeah, this has run-on sentences, like a really long sentence that could really use a few commas. And the dialogue is still very awkward. And again, Wesley does not have the heart to tell Data how bad it is. So he suggests to Data that maybe he needs a woman's perspective on this type of scene. You know, the scene where these two characters are getting intimate. So yeah, there's awkwardness going on like all around, really. So he shares it with Beverly, Dr. Crusher, and she gives it a read, and she thinks to herself that it feels like an adolescent male fantasy. Like it doesn't feel real. Like she doesn't express all of this to Data, but she says that maybe he could use a revision, maybe taking after Jane Austen, who, Crusher is talking about her tastes and how she likes how Jane Austen has the characters express what they feel in a clear and direct way. And so Data sets out to model the revision after a Jane Austen type style. And so then he shows this particular draft to Deanna Troi, and she reads it, and it has her laughing because, the dialogue and the sentences, they feel very Jane Austen-esque, but in a funny way where it feels like it's a Jane Austen parody, or perhaps a Charlotte Bronte parody. Like she sort of narrows it down between the two, and Data explains that it's not meant to be a parody, it's meant to be serious. So this is when Deanna breaks it to him that the way that he's written this is no good, and Data realizes in hindsight that everyone else was holding back on criticisms, And Troy gives him this advice that he'll never be a good writer unless he writes with his own voice rather than emulating these other styles. And she mentions that people can't write about, for example, can't write about passionate love without having experienced that sort of thing. And that people write what they know, using their own experiences. Now, I have mixed feelings about her advice. I think there are certain things that people can write about without having experienced it. They just need to maybe do a little research or talk to people who've experienced the whatever subject that they're writing about. I'm sure it varies to different extents, but I do agree with her whole thing about people write from experience. Write what you know. That's a very effective method. You sort of start from there and then can extrapolate and exaggerate plot details that branch out from there, and they become an entirely new thing. So not just a regurgitation of a prior experience. And having your own voice, like, that's also a huge thing. As humans, it's natural that we have all these influences, artistic and literary influences, but we don't, ideally you should not try to emulate the writing style of the writers you admire. You can keep in mind what they did in their stories that you felt was effective, and maybe that'll help you figure out an effective way to tell something in your story. But you find your own voice, that you have influences, but you're able to write something in your own way. And the result, even though you have all these influences, it becomes something entirely new and entirely you. Whereas AI, and basically what Data was trying to emulate a certain style. I believe there are AI prompts where it's like, write in the style of this person, and it'll spit something out. And that's very terrifying and is not a good way to write something. You might even just type in a few words and be like, oh, write something about this, and it'll spit something out. And that's not really creative in my view. Like, I really appreciate the challenge of trying to craft a story on my own, on your own. It's what I prefer. AI takes away the fun of the challenge. And so when thinking about all this AI discourse while reading this subplot involving Data writing a novel, it made me wonder, like, what exactly is it possible for Data at this point, an artificial being pre-emotion chip, to write in his own voice? I'm sure there are various Star Trek The Next Generation episodes that you can cite to either argue or defend, like, whether or not he can at this point. But yeah, it really makes me wonder. And it's also strange to read this storyline with the lens of the stuff that people are dealing with today when it comes to AI. But again, I'm all about the challenge of crafting a story on your own and having the pieces in your mind, the scenes that seem so clear, and just putting them together and filling in the gaps and trying to figure it out on your own rather than take this easy way out. But when it comes to Star Trek and seeing Data try that sort of thing, it comes across like kind of cute and funny, which is very bizarre. It was a different time. It was 1990, and today, as we seemingly get closer to certain aspects of what we thought of the future, while unfortunately drifting away from other aspects that we would have liked. I don't know, it's just all very strange. And looking back at these fictional works with the lens of today. So, yeah, that's pretty much all I had to say about that. The book, like I said, those particular scenes involving Data are very fun. He has his moment, a couple uh, good moments that have to do with the main plot of the book. There are a couple other things that didn't really age well. There's a huge age gap between, like, there's a mention of a romance that Riker experienced when he was young, and there's a huge age gap between him and a woman who's mentioned. But yeah, you might still get something out of reading this, even if just the diversion of reading Data's attempts at trying to write a romance novel. So, yeah, that's pretty much all I had to say for this video. I might link my written review of this novel in the description, but yeah, it's pretty much all I had to say for today. And to all of you out there, have a happy first contact day.